school directors will please come to order. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Director Garcia,
Present.
Director Gokul Gandhi,
Present.
Director Jackson has asked to be excused, Director Herndon,
Present.
and Chair Zombor.
Present.
That's 4 members present.
The Pledge of Allegiance was recited at the previous meeting. This meeting is being conducted from the Central Services Building. This meeting is also being broadcast via live stream on the MPS website and on the MPS YouTube stream, the links to which may be found on the MPS website on the broadcast page. Before we begin tonight's meeting, we have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la Junta Escolar de las Escuelas Públicas de Milwaukee. Si desea escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor llame al 312-626-6799. Nuevamente, 312-626-6799. E introduzca el número de reunión 608-130-5362. Nuevamente, el número de reunión es 608-130-5362. Gracias.
For each of our items of business, we will hold a discussion and public hearing. If you wish to speak, please fill out a speaker slip and bring it to our secretary, Ms. Koala. Virtual speakers are asked to remain on the platform until you are called upon. After speaking, virtual speakers may follow the rest of the meeting using the broadcast information previously mentioned. When you are called upon to speak, please state your name and spell your last name for the record. For the sake of fairness and to give everyone a chance to speak, the chair reserves the right to limit the length of time allowed to any one speaker. Written testimony will be accepted for transmittal to the board. Send this testimony to the Office of Board Governance, P.O. Box 2181, Milwaukee, Wisconsin 53201, or fax to 414-475-8071, or email it to governance@milwaukee.k12.wi.us. Just as a reminder, Robert's Rules of Order dictates that all comments should be directed to the chair of the committee. Also, any questions or requests, including those from the public, committee members, or the administration, are to be directed toward the chair, who will determine the most efficient way to address them. For the safety of all and to ensure the good order of the meeting, harassment or intimidation tactics of any kind will not be tolerated. Anyone who engages in such harassing or intimidating words or actions will immediately be asked to cease. If such behavior continues, a recess will be called and the offending parties will be removed from the meeting. Anyone ejected from the meeting may continue to listen to the meeting or access the agenda items online. However, the individual will not be allowed to rejoin the meeting. Also, no one other than members of the board, designated staff, and those who have been invited to present or participate in items of business will be allowed on stage before, during, or after meetings of the board and its committees. Finally, for our listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting the meetings, agendas, and minutes page of the MPS website. Now let's begin. Madam Secretary, item 1.
Item 1 is action on a request to approve revisions to Administrative Policy 7.38, Balanced Assessment Systems. The recommendation is that the board approve the revisions to Administrative Policy 7.38 as outlined in the attachments.
Would the administration please present the item?
Chairs on board, members of the committee, Eduardo Galvan, Acting Superintendent. This evening, Dr. Melanie Stewart will present recommended revisions to Administrative Policy 7.38 as we seek your approval for these changes. Dr.
Good
Stewart.
evening, Director Zombor, members of the committee, Melanie Stewart, Director of Research Assessment and Data. Administrative Policy 7.38 was last reviewed in 2010, and there have been a tremendous amount of differences that have occurred in assessment since that time period. This is back when WKCE was our main form of assessment. The majority of updates are grammar and small language, but there have been some changes, particularly in how assessments are currently structured to better provide access for students. So you will see in 1C, the term designated supports. Designated supports are available for all students, students with disabilities, English learners, every student in the district, that provides them greater access to assessments. So we have included that. Additionally, the guidance from the state has changed over the years for the access of English learners to take assessments. So the current practices, which we hold in most assessments, is that an English learner, if they are new to the country and have an English language proficiency less than 1 or 2, they have a full year exemption in taking any assessment in reading or English language arts. And we have used that measure that is common for the state, so our children are used to the same in our classrooms, et cetera. So at this time, I'd be more than glad to answer any questions that you have about the proposed revisions.
Do committee members wish to make comments or ask questions? Director Gokul-Gandhi.
Okay, hello. So I know that we, look at our rules and we look at our policies, but we're sort of starting a new procedure where we're looking at all of our policies and procedures. And so just to level set for our listening audience, can administration just walk through, okay, what are these? How do we use them? How are they communicated to parents? Who uses them? How are school leaders made aware of what these are, when to use them, and what does just the general communication of this look like, and what does this look like in practice, right? I can read this, but what does it look like in practice? And then for each one, what would be helpful for you to tell me is who's the audience for the policy, how is it used in day-to-day school operations, and what is the responsibility and commitment from the district to the family of the student as it relates to each individual policy?
Administration.
Director Gokul-Gandhi, Director Zambor, members of the committee, Melanie Stewart, Director of Research Assessment and Data. This policy covers from our classroom assessments up to our federal assessments like NAEPS. So this covers a lot of territory about the administration and use of assessments. In the classroom, those are teacher originated, they are teacher designed, meant to align to the standards, which all tests are. Assessments are aligned to the various standards of the state. At the classroom level, we provide assessments both in English and language of instruction. In some cases, we are able to use, that goes back to the designated supports, et cetera, as you go up to universal screeners, which are more of our benchmark assessments. Our current benchmark assessments would be things like Brigance or STAR. We as a district are always looking at our students and making certain that, for example, STAR is available in English and Spanish, so that our bilingual students are being assessed in Spanish, and as they grow older, they can be assessed in both languages to really determine if that bilingualism is actually being developed. Looking at state tests, that is things like your Wisconsin Forward, Pre-ACT, ACT. Looking at national assessments, that's like NAEP and TIMSS. Those all have specific guidelines and questions. For every assessment that we are required to give, there is training of the teachers on how to administer the test and also how to use the data and results from the test. All communication, all parents should be receiving communications about their child's performance. Doesn't matter if it is a classroom assessment, a STAR test, a Wisconsin Forward. As a matter of fact, we're prepping up the individual student reports for the pre-ACT that our office will be mailing out to families so they can get those in a timely fashion. All of those reports have parent letters, always in Spanish, Hmong, but in some cases, like the Access, we also have translations, and I believe it's 40 languages, so that we can better communicate the results. So depending upon the level of the assessment, what we are looking at is how do we make certain that We define the purpose, and every assessment should just be part of the learning process and help us understand how students are progressing, how they're growing, and how we can better help them to be able to grow and learn. So that's a very simple answer for a very multi-level system of assessments.
Thank you. Any follow-up?
Yeah, can I have two follow-ups? Okay. So the one follow-up is you said, there's a list of particular assessments. Do you think it would be helpful to outline those in this policy so that parents understand what exactly makes up a balanced assessment system and what languages that might be available in? Do we want to include the parental communication piece in here? And then the third thing is, I did today a quick grade reading level of most of our policies, and they're like 14th grade and above. And so I also worry about the accessibility if we're giving this to a wide audience. What does that look like for anyone to be able to just access this and as clean as data? Because what you said to me, I get that in this, but that is just so much of a clearer understanding of what this means, right? And I'm just wondering if we also need to look at language accessibility, grade level language accessibility as we think about our policies.
Administration?
Director Zambor, Director Gogol-Gandhi, members of the committee, Melanie Stewart, Director of Research Assessment and Data. The first part I will take on is the variety of assessments. On the district website, we have for every, I believe it's grade level, the assessments that students take, whether it's available in multiple languages, et cetera, the purpose of assessments. And those are available both for our staff as well as families, so that they have guides to what to expect on these assessments. Having the assessments in the policy, I don't know that that would be advantageous because of the switch. As we are looking every 3 years at an RFP, we may be changing assessments, so that would require that we would be changing the policy. We've seen multiple changes over the years from the state. I was looking at all the assessments that changed since we last visited that, and that would be a lot of assessments. So I think having the overarching areas is probably better, as long as we have other communications available to parents and staff. Every year, we also share a assessment calendar that shows what tests are given, what are the windows in which the test is given. Also, we report out on the number of minutes that actually the test, because sometimes there's some misunderstanding when we put a window out. The test may be 90 minutes, but we have a 3-week window. The test is still just a full 45 minutes, 90 minutes, or whatever. As to the information about policies and that, I think that's a broader question than particular to this policy. And I don't know if you want to address that.
Just to add on, just before I address that, at the school level, we also work very closely with that assessment calendar, and that's part of the tool that schools use to make sure that they adjust their calendars or send that information to parents so that we make sure we align those, because there are times throughout the year where those assessments can overlap, whether that's access, STAR, or forward. So we want to make sure that there's windows that we identify, and we communicate that to schools, and schools communicate that to families, so that we have families not taking vacations that are longer, so that we have opportunities to have makeup days. So that's another form of communication at the school level and also to families. And then they also share those at natural times, whether that's parent-teacher conferences, whenever there's an assessment there. And we make sure that families are understanding of what those results mean, because they are sometimes a little bit difficult to understand. So certainly, and families can reach out to the school. They can reach out to assessment to get a clarification if they have a misunderstanding about what something means. And I will ask to repeat that last question.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think it's just a general, like, I understand that there is legal language and wording and state statute that we have to follow for some of these, and we can't control that. I just, as we think about grade level reading as in our policies and what we write, like I've run on the, especially the ones that we have now, and they're all like almost college level, if not master's degree level reading. And so I'm curious about the accessibility, given that what we know about grade level reading in our country, you know, are we setting a good example by having this be like grade level 20? You know, that's inaccessible to a lot of people. And so if this is sort of the guiding document, these policies and these rules to how we govern and act and conduct our business here at MPS, and I know that's like a broader philosophical question, but if we're starting this review, I think it's important to think about what language we use, what words we use, and how accessible the policies are to a general audience.
Any follow-up from administration?
Well, as a possible solution, we could consider side by side something that we do in terms of when these letters go out, we could add some language that would be more understandable to families in terms of what we do these assessments for and what our procedures are for administering them and reporting them.
Thank you. Do any other committee members wish to make comments? Director Garcia.
Yes. I know in the last couple of months, there's been a lot of, demands from school districts to really respond to the changes in specifically in Act 20. So I guess like my question is if you can just kind of, for our listening audience, just give an overview as to like what those changes have been. And then I'll go into my second question once that happens.
Director Zambor, Director Garcia, members of the committee, Melanie Stewart, Director of Research Assessment and Data. Act 20 is going to bring forward to us two different assessments. One is a screener of early foundational literacy for K-4 twice a year, and for K-5 through third grade 3 times a year. The assessment has not been identified, but we are expecting very, very soon an announcement and being able to look at the assessment that has been chosen. There has been some change in the wording of the Act 20 FAQs that indicates that there may be some availability of alternate languages. So we have a subcommittee of our from our bilingual multicultural education team and from the assessment team that are looking into the exact languages, to looking at the wording that we are seeing. So once the screener is identified, then we can look into it to see what other options may be available, to see if there is the potential to request waivers like we did back in 2013 for the present reading readiness. So there is a team that is on the ground keeping track of everything that's coming out so that we can respond. The second assessment is going to be the diagnostic assessment. Under Act 20, if a student tests below the 25th percentile on the screener, they will be required to take a diagnostic assessment and also have an individualized reading plan developed. Our understanding is that the literacy team from the Department of Public Instruction will be choosing the list of diagnostics. So they will not choose a single, but they will give districts a list of approved diagnostics. And at that point, then we would be able, as a district, to make our best choice as to what that assessment would be. That also would be 3 times a year for those students who have been identified. Likewise, if there is the ability and option to look at alternate languages, we've got a team ready to begin that work.
Thank you. Any follow-up?
Yes. So I guess the question also is, I know there was some confusion in terms of the way that the current, I guess, law is being written, really does exclude the type of tests that are available in first languages. How does, I guess, like, where are we with that? Because I see that one of the red lines here in the policy no longer includes that provision. So I just wanted to kind of call that out. I'm looking at 1C.
Director Zambor, Director Garcia, members of the committee. When we are able to use alternate languages, we do. We use most of the assessments that we currently give. Back in 2010, we had 4 pages of an assessment calendar. And so there were a wide variety of assessments, and we are down to a much smaller number of assessments so that we are using the ones that are required, except for classroom assessments that are created by the teachers. So we follow the guidelines of what we are able to do under each of those. As we look at the language that is coming out, that is why we have a team gathered, because it does indicate that if we request a waiver on an assessment to have it in a different language, is that it needs to cover the same areas of assessment that are outlined in the law, unless we can demonstrate that that is not how the language is learned. So an example that this is from 2013, we found that rhyming is not always done in other languages. And so rhyming was a component of those tests, and we were able to explain that the instruction of those languages didn't have the concept of rhyming, and we were still approved at that time. Our task will be to look at the requirements in Act 20, look at what assessments are available, and if we request a waiver, we need to be able to demonstrate, the burden will be on us to demonstrate that either it meets the requirements of Act 20 and or that those components are not part of the language acquisition in a particular language. So that is the work that this subcommittee will be working on.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Director Garcia?
No, thank you for that. And I just wanted to take this time to just thank the team that's on the floor, or on the floor, on the ground. Oh my gosh. Just being vigilant, because many times, as we're looking at policy, it has real life impact on the way that districts can get ready, the way that teachers are prepared for this, the way that parents are informed about this, and most importantly, the way that students are allowed to kind of show and demonstrate their learning. So just wanted to throw some appreciation out there and just know that that we're vigilant, and this is a changing landscape, and I'm just very grateful that we're very much taking a lead on this for the whole state. So props to all the team involved.
Thank you.
I'd echo that, and appreciate you keeping us informed about changes with the FAQs too as those develop. Secretary Koala.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of piggyback on something that Dr. Stewart said in response to one of Director Gokul-Gandhi's questions about posting a list of assessments. Just in a broad sense, we like to write policy in a way that's a little more broad so that they don't have to keep coming back for revisions for things that change frequently. But to that particular point, a motion maker may wish to add an additional modification to this policy that requires that a list of current assessments be posted on the district's website. And that way, anyone reading the policy would be alerted that they can find the most recent list on our website.
Thank you. Do any other committee members have comments or wish to make questions or ask questions? Mr. Jason.
Thank you, Chair Zambor. Dr. Stewart, you may have already answered this question, but specifically where the new language that Director Garcia called out, where it reads English learners, and this is in 1C, may be exempt from testing. That discretion is applied to that committee you were referencing in terms of the language acquisition? Okay, maybe you can educate me, please.
Dr. Stewart?
Yes, Director Zomber, Matt Chasen, members of the committee. The changes from 2010 to the present, because English learners, back in 2010, the rules were different. But as the English language learner population has grown in the state, that has become a regular rule that a student does not need to be tested in English in reading ELA within their first 12 months if their language proficiency is a 1 or a 2. So we've included that here to make certain that that's accessible in all of those assessments. That is generally the rule of thumb across all standardized assessments. As we look then with classroom assessments, what's the language of instruction? If I'm at French immersion, my tests are going to be in French. If I'm in a bilingual school, my tests are going to be in Spanish because that is my language of instruction. If I am an English learner, then there are still the designated supports that I need to be given to be able to access assessment. That becomes the differentiation in assessment and how we do good education and how we provide education and assessments that are accessible to all of our students in our classrooms.
Thank you. Any follow-up?
Yeah, I guess to that point, what am I hearing is that this is applied at the student level, at the classroom level, I'm trying to figure out who has the level of discretion and at what level of discretion that gets applied.
Director Zambor, Matt Chasen, members of the committee. On the exemption for English learners, that's on any standardized test. That is universal. That then at the classroom level, then that is the teacher's discretion to best provide accommodations for the child so that they're assessing the child so they can determine what they need. And so, but that is the guidance for on a standardized assessment.
Any follow-up, Mr. Jason?
Not on that one, just one additional one. There's some new language under 2A. And just to make sure I understand what, if any, discretion is applied, or to clear up maybe any ambiguity, it reads, some state and national assessment results are reported publicly. And I want to make sure that there's clear understanding for the purpose of transparency by the district that, are we referring to that it is those state and national assessments and those sources that report publicly, or is it our receipt of that we report publicly?
Administration?
Director Zambor, Matt Chasen, members of the committee. What we were looking at in this is that some of these are reported publicly. NAEP is a good example. It is reported publicly, and currently Milwaukee Public Schools is a trial urban district assessment group. Therefore, we have results that are reported publicly. If we were not a TUDA, they would be just part of the group of state results. So we also have other standardized tests like STAR. We share those publicly in reports here to the board, but we don't report those publicly on our website. So we're looking at that, but it's again the nuances and then the assessments that are on the state site that are publicly available.
Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
follow-up? Do any other committee members wish to make comments or ask questions? Director Garcia.
Sorry, just one more question. In regards to the students that end up, after the diagnostic being below the 25 percentile, I know that the mention of an IRP was mentioned. And I know that, through some of the, conversations with parents and community groups, there was a question in regards to really what that meant. And like, does that then, flag the student as special education? Can you just demystify or clarify that for our listening audience?
Excellent. Director Zambor, Director Garcia, members of the committee. The individualized reading plan is meant to be for the child. It is meant to look and use the diagnostic assessment to see where the child needs additional support in those foundational reading areas. Having a child that is on an individualized reading plan in no way makes the child a student special ed. If a parent wants to refer the child, they will be able to refer the child. Then that will start the process that we currently have in place. The individual reading plan is very similar to what we currently use for a Tier 3 or what's a scientifically research-based intervention plan. So I think it would streamline the process that if there is that concern or a parent does refer, that we would already have all of the pieces in place to monitor. The hope is those highly individualized plans are going to help the student grow, master the content, and be ready to learn to read fully and at grade level, precluding any of those other things to occur. So that's the hope for the individualized reading plan. It's just right now a plan designed for that particular child.
Thank you. No further questions.
Okay, thank you. Do any other committee members wish to ask questions? Vice President Gokul Gandhi.
I would just like to make a motion to include the list of assessments as well as their descriptions on the website for the upcoming school year. And then, or can you, if the secretary could please help me out to craft that motion, that would be.
So are you moving approval of the administration's recommendations with the additional modification that the list of assessments, a description, be included on the website?
Yes, please.
Before we take action on that, Madam Secretary, do any members of the public wish to make comments?
Madam Chair, we had no request to speak on this item.
Okay. Then what is the pleasure of the committee with respect to this item? Sorry, yes, we have a motion on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Will the secretary please call the roll?
On the motion by Director Gokul Gandhi to approve the administration's recommendation with the additional modification to policy that a list of current assessments and their description be posted on the district's website. Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Chair Zambor.
Aye.
That's 4 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item 2, action on a request to approve revisions to Administrative Policy and Procedure 7.26, textbook instructional materials adoption. The recommendation is that the board approve the revisions as listed in the attachments to this item.
Would the administration please present this item?
Chair Zambor, members of the committee, Eduardo Galvan, Acting Superintendent. This evening, the Office of Academics will present recommended revisions to Administrative Policy 7.26. We ask your approval of the recommended revisions, and we have Ms. Genny and Dr. Saffold here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Do committee members wish to make comments or ask questions? Director Gokul Gandhi.
So I've had some constituents email me about some concerns. So one question is that the difference between, so I guess it's a two-part question, AP classes that do not have Spanish translations, and they've gotten around this requirement by saying the AP exams must be taken in English so that the textbooks should also be in English. And then this policy only applies to K-12 courses and AP courses. So there's a difference between IB classes and AP courses for textbook adoption. So could you, I know that was a two-part question, happy to reiterate one part and the other part, and then there's a language component to the textbook adoption for AP courses.
Administration?
I think the policy states that all textbooks are to be available in Spanish, and the problem is that some of the AP classes don't have that option. So how do we address that in this policy?
Director Calgandi, Chair Sambor, members of the committee, Lorena Geni, Director, Department of Bilingual Multicultural Education. One of the first question about the AP, it is needed since a lot of our students from a Spanish background having a bilingual program needs to also, have the option to take AP classes and advanced courses. One of the things is that if we do not provide that for them in Spanish, because they are allowed level 1 or 2, having a bilingual program, we're just denying them from that opportunity. So they're not learning the content. But if it is specifically for literacy, well, we could also, then if it's something that is impossible for the vendor that was chosen, then we would, somehow look for a vendor that can, provide us with English and Spanish. For other content areas, we would rather have, the translations. And the district, does give them a whole year for them to do the translation. If not, then, we go with the same procedure. But the idea is not, for equity reason and for having a bilingual program that, which we do have to report to the state and the feds, that we do have provide, these opportunities for students in the bilingual program that are ELs and also speak Spanish. Many of them speak, Spanish very well, and they can prepare to take, advanced courses. But they're not going to do that well if it is only provided in English. Then therefore, what we do is we just kind of hurry up and, we need to get them into a monolingual program so they can take these courses, where they're not going to do that well if they don't have that, learning the content in a language they understand.
Any follow-up, Director Gogol-Gandhi?
So the second part of the question is, this policy doesn't apply to IB classes, so how do we address the difference between AP, IB, and general textbook adoption?
Administration?
I'm not really quite sure how to answer the question. I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Is there a separate policy for, can you clarify the question?
Yeah, so say there was a textbook, I'm sure there are separate textbooks for IB, separate textbooks for AP. So this is I think a blanket policy. Are we saying, I just want to get clarity, are we saying that for every textbook, IB, AP, and general, it's the same policy? Are we using the same policy and procedure regardless of the classification of type?
Administration?
I see Ms. Mims Howell coming to the stage to answer my question. Thank you.
Ms. Howell?
Chair Zomboard, Director Gogol-Gandhi, members of the committee, Jennifer Mims Howell, Chief Academic Officer. One of the reasons that we provided the revisions to this policy was to make it uniform for all textbooks. So it will include textbooks that are for our students who need a more advanced curriculum, as well as our students who need, textbooks and materials for supplemental. So it will meet all textbook requirements.
Thank you. Any follow-up?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
but I can wait. If other members of the committee have questions, I can.
Committee members have questions? Director Garcia?
I just want to thank the revisions that it includes the that we just can't rely on Google Translate to meet this. So I just wanted to thank you for that. I know that, it's an easy way that most folks have access to, Google Translate to meet the different linguistic needs. But, I think that the way that I'm interpreting the changes here is really the commitment that as a district we're making to ensure that, specifically, Spanish speakers that are reading, speaking, and writing at very advanced levels have the opportunity to continue to do that. This year we had the highest levels of biliteracy, seals of biliteracy, and I think that this is only going to make, that much stronger for, the offerings that we have specifically for, the diverse linguistic needs of our district. So thank you.
Thank you. Do any other committee members have questions or would like to make comments? Director Gokul Gandhi, you can finish.
Okay. And yes, Director Garcia, absolutely. And I think my question is, there are certain AP classes that don't have that availability of this. Is that correct? Am I incorrect in saying that there are certain AP classes that only offer textbooks in English, like they don't have the translation yet?
Chair Zomber, Chair Zomber, Vice President Gokul Gandhi, members of the committee, Jennifer Mims Howe, Chief Academic Officer. So again, the policy was rewritten so that we could include those.
Okay.
And what we've been looking at is that we asked vendors for those translations. And as Lorena, again, he stated that we asked them to do the translation within 1 year. If indeed they don't have that, we can look for other vendors that do have the text in the language that's needed in a bilingual program. That would be Spanish.
Follow-up?
Yep. So then this kind of leads into my second question that concern I've received from a constituent is that the criteria they've asked is really restrictive they feel that it's restrictive to the point that sometimes they're unable to, even if, like, for example, they gave a case that on a recent AP U.S. government adoption, they were not allowed to consider the textbook that is widely regarded as the best book for urban students because the publisher would not hire high school students during the life of the adoption. And so the remaining choices were either too hard to read or did not match the AP curriculum. And as a result of the dilemma, they did not adopt the book. And so I'm wondering, like, in that circumstance, one, I guess I just wanted to get some insight, is there something we're missing in terms of the discussion that happened? Is there an opportunity to have a backdoor? I'm just voicing a concern that a constituent, I just want to understand a little bit more, if you could explain.
Administration?
Thank you. Chair Zomber, Director Gokul Gandhi, members of the committee, Jennifer Mims Howe, Chief Academic Officer. I believe the process that you're speaking of, Director Gokul Gandhi, is about the selection of the textbook process. And so that's a little different than the policy that we have here.
Okay.
So one of the reasons, again, that was that meeting happened prior to the textbook adoption, and the reason we're making a more uniformed textbook adoption and looking at the criteria so that does not happen. We do know that there are books that are available to our students in Milwaukee Public Schools that either can be translated or are books that a committee of we put out the committee criteria in Thursday updates and put it out to the community. There are textbooks that committees don't agree on necessarily. Therefore, those books aren't chosen. It's a majority vote in many cases, and also what can happen is the conversation they have around the content of those textbooks comes out then. So I believe we're speaking to criteria and making the selection versus criteria and textbook adoption. So we can definitely look at that in a different way if you would like us to.
Director Gokul Gandhi?
Yeah, I think that would be good. And, is there are we including any sort of revision/waiver process, right? So that people feel like they're getting the due process to appeal if they feel like a case hasn't been made. I know that's not probably, you're like, we've worked really hard on this, and if we wanted to include it, we would have, and we didn't for a reason. So you can tell me that, and I'm fine with that.
Administration?
Director, Chair Zambor, Director Gogo Gandhi, members of the committee, Jennifer Mims Howe, Chief Academic Officer. It's not necessarily about appealing it from a person. It's more about looking at the RFP process for an adoption. Again, we're trying to make the policy more uniformed and get away from looking at waivers, because we feel that students in Milwaukee Public Schools, no matter the program, be it Montessori, be it IB, be it a program for our students with disabilities, they all need to be high-quality instructional materials. And that's what the committee and the team looked for when we were adopting this new textbook policy, and making sure that when we look for vendors, that they're meeting the needs of a multicultural urban school district, but also high-quality instruction materials that reach reading levels that our students should aspire to read. So I think there's a mixture of a couple of things that your constituents are asking. We could definitely discuss that in a different way if they're concerns about the criteria of making a selection, criteria of who's on the committee, and also criteria of how things are being used in classrooms, because this is just more than just the textbooks. It's any learning material that we have for our students.
Thank you. Follow-up?
Nope, thank you very much.
Do any other committee members have questions? Director Garcia?
I was just going to make a motion.
Mr. Chasen?
Thank you, Chair Zambor. Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. There's some language, it's a new paragraph 4. Once the RFP process opens, there shall be no communication with vendors. I'm concerned that that might be too exclusionary for the purposes of our procurement team, who may have legitimate reasons during a Q&A period or otherwise to have discussions with a vendor during the open period. It is not uncommon in an RFP process for that need to take place. You'll notice that in the language that appears further down, that once the RFP process closed, only procurement staff may communicate with vendors, and that's very reasonable. I would be of the opinion that you would want your procurement staff, in order to accommodate questions, by being the interface between vendors and subject matter experts, to remove any biases, that you would want procurement staff to be able to field questions on behalf of the district during that process. And I feel this language is too narrow. If the administration wants to react to that, that's fine. Or if they wanted to call their procurement expert out here, they could do that as well.
Administration?
Chair Zomber, Mr. Chasen, we can clarify that language. This particular number 4 is in regards to the committee. And so as you see later on, we're specifying that procurement is the one that's having conversations with the vendors. So this number 4 is talking about, as we have our selection committees, which is our group of teachers that are, in our specialists, they are the ones that are not having conversations with the vendors. And so we're saying that once the RFP, our procurement department is the only one having those conversations. And so it's maybe not clear enough in number 4, but that's the audience that's referring to.
Any follow-up, Mr. Chasen? Do any other committee members wish to make comments? Madam Secretary, do any members of the public wish to make comments?
We do have one speaker on the virtual platform. That is Mr. Quentin Claybon. Again, if you could please say your name, spell your last name, and then give your comments.
Hi, this is Quentin Claybon, Klabon. First, I want to commend the directors, particularly those who introduced policy changes, for really digging into policy revision in general, aligning with, on the other one, the Acts 20 literacy law shows a real attention to detail that other districts around the state haven't shown yet. So much appreciated. Second, I wanted to suggest a tweak to the bilingual curriculum policy. That constituent was not me, mentioned previously, but I did want to echo their concern. Totally legitimate way to go about things, and CAO Mims Howell explained why very well. I think in some cases that likely restricts you, though, to the biggest textbook companies. And that's totally fine if you want to do that, but you may be boxed into the same set of large publishers and choices across curricula. So maybe, I may be echoing perhaps the out, even if that would to provide one an English set from one company and a Spanish set from another company, if possible, especially if either the English or the Spanish for one curriculum company is really excellent, and that's something that people want to pursue. Lastly, on the curriculum choosing, I wanted to suggest one thing. I want to recommend that the board provide input at an earlier stage in the curriculum purchase process, perhaps once the curriculum finalists have been chosen. So sorry if I got any of this wrong, but currently it sounds like the board committee only learns of the curriculum choices after a final choice has been made by the curriculum committee. And that means the committee's already done hours and hours of work before they even encounter SASI, and their analysis either doesn't show up in detail sometimes in the presentations, or there's not a presentation at all. And that creates a huge bias towards accepting expensive purchases and really important purchases blindly, give or take, discussions on cost. So since they're so important, I just want to suggest three options. One, perhaps the policy could include board presence on any curriculum committee. Two, maybe more efficiently, the curriculum committee could provide a presentation to the board at the teacher piloting phase rather than at the final phase. That way you could offer your input and guidance before the final decision, but still let the experts decide. Three, and sorry, that could violate the confidentiality policy. But three, by official procedure in section G or just by directive, the committee could also provide multiple finalists to the board instead of just the final choice. So presenting, these are our top two options. Here's the one we would prefer, but we're going to give you a choice of two. That could help the board still provide some flexibility and decision-making on the process. Thanks so much for addressing these policies. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Director Gokul-Gandhi, do you have a comment to make?
Yeah, I guess clarification from the administration, is that true that we are made aware once the committee has already decided?
Chair Zomber, Director Gokul-Gandhi, members of the committee, Jennifer Mims-Howe, Chief Academic Officer. When we put out the request to have members be a part of the meeting, we first start with one bringing it to the board, to asking for permission to do a textbook adoption. And then once that's granted, we put out the members for the committee. Board members can be committee members. We also have the books available at board meetings during that time of RFP, during selection time for board members to look at. So board members, you don't receive the final selection. That information goes to the superintendent in a closed envelope, again, as Mr. Claiborne said, for confidentiality purposes. However, in the future, if a presentation needs to be done about the multiple RFPs candidates that we had, or those we make a selection of, that could definitely be worked in. We do meetings with parents and we do meetings with community members. And so if you choose not to join that because of quorum rules, we definitely could do something different for the textbook adoption. Maybe 2x2s could be recommended, or those who are interested, like I said, can join different committees as long as we don't have more than 2 board members on the committee.
Follow-up?
So just, I want to be really clear about this. So does it come to SASE once you've already made the decision?
Chair Zomber, Director Gokul-Gandhi, yes, it comes to SASE once a committee has made the decision.
Okay, and so so I want to ask Mr. Chasen, what is, in terms of, we have many RFPs that come to the district, and so what is best practice in terms of the board's responsibility in making decisions like that, knowing that I am not a curriculum specialist, right? But I have a responsibility to, if there are, like, for instance, when we did the social studies adoption, we said, hey, there are parts of this that don't really match teaching the truth, and that's what we're committed to. And so now we as a board have decided that we want a different committee that's going through this, right? That seemed appropriate for the board to say, but can you provide best practice around, I think, Mr. Claiborne's comments, and then additionally, as we're thinking about this policy, what that looks like?
Chair Zomber, Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. So certainly the general premise within governance is that you delegate this authority to your subject matter experts, generally those on the administration. In terms of how you then distance yourself in any public procurement process from any conflict, is there is some distancing that takes place, and delegating that authority to the administration helps support that as well. However, there isn't anything, to Ms. Mims-Howell's point, that prohibits select board members avoiding quorum issues from participating in pre-steps to that, provided there's, again, sufficient distancing between you and the vendor so that there's no appearance, actual or otherwise, of a conflict. So there are, as Ms. Mims-Howell suggested, there's ways by which the board can have more insight and still provide the appropriate distancing that's required, but generally as a best practice, you do delegate this authority to the admin for that reason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any follow-up?
Yeah, just one more follow-up. So Ms. Mims-Howell, from the options you heard to sort of include the board in a pre-step so that we are still in the loop and have opportunity to provide feedback, what would you suggest as the best way for us to give that feedback without interfering in, the separation of the procurement process, and then also knowing that all of us might not have that subject matter expertise that you're looking for?
Chair Zambor, Director Gokul Gandhi, members of the committee, Jennifer Mims-Howell, Chief Academic Officer. I think a couple ways. We do encourage board members to be a part of the committees. Again, quorum, of course. And that is how, as you mentioned, the social studies information was also kind of looked at again. There is a checklist that we go through when we have our committee meetings of the groups. And so there's another opportunity there to voice your opinion and give feedback on the books that are being observed through an RFP. I mean, in some cases, too, board members have also recommended materials that have been used either through Council of Great City Schools or other school districts that you may have encountered as you have been to, statewide school board meetings or other recommendations. For instance, if there was a award-winning text that was put out there, we would make sure we'd include that maybe in the RFP process so that that could happen as well. But again, remembering to distance yourself from the vendor is just a recommendation, and then you participate just through the regular public process.
Thank you. Any follow-up?
I guess I would just ask my colleagues what you all think is the best way for us to be included in this process and what that looks like as a formalized point of procedure, because I'm not certain. So I'm also looking to all of you to help.
Director Garcia?
I think that the process that we currently have in place allows for folks to tap in and out as they want to. And, I think that from a, board member perspective, maybe just be a little bit more vigilant as to what are those committee opportunities, if there's any significant adoptions that are coming our way. If that's something that, interests you specifically, maybe you can be one of those 2 people that can be part of that committee. I do like the idea of the 2x2s in terms of just kind of giving an overview as to, like the path that we're looking for and just setting a little bit more of like the baseline of what the committee is looking for. I feel like that can only really empower us to have more information as decisions come down the road. But I do see the importance of the distancing us from having to make, that final purchasing decision. So I appreciate that, and I want to make sure we safeguard that so that there's no, biases or problems down the road.
Thank you. Can I pass the gavel? Yeah,
Sure.
to-
Yeah.
Okay.
Chair Zambor.
Thank you. I do have a question as it relates to procurement. And so I know we go to RFP, and it seems like once we get the actual contract, the price has already been set. But because it's such a expensive cost to the district, what would happen in the AFP committee if we said, can you please go back to the vendor and renegotiate? Is that something that we can do to try to lower the price? Or once that comes forward to us, are we locked in?
Administration.
Chair Zambor, members of the board, right now, when we bring it to you, it is final. But after the committee makes their decision, the procurement team really does go to negotiating. And then our team looks at we look at the materials and what we would like to see them offer. And then the procurement team really goes to bat to say, what can we get included? Can we get some free teacher editions? How many bundles per teacher? So they do all of that work before we come here. And so at this point, the way the process goes, they've done all that legwork. They've included bundles. They've included what's free. And then we come with, this is their best offer.
Director Zambor?
Thank you. I'll take the gavel back.
Okay, passing the gavel back.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the committee that wish to make comments? Director Garcia.
I just had, I wanted to make a motion, but I also wanted to make sure that we incorporated some of what Mr. Chasen concern in regards to maybe not being as restrictive for, the team. I know that's something that we need to wordsmith here on the floor, but Secretary Koala, can you help us with that?
If I'm understanding your intention, it would be to approve the administration's recommendation with an additional modification to policy section 4 to clarify that procurement staff is authorized to communicate with vendors.
Yes, does that capture the sentiment? All right, yes.
And do we need to put in there the 2x2 option, or is that just something, a best practice you will all follow? I guess I'm looking to both.
Administration?
Would not codify that in
Okay,
policy.
Great. Then we don't have to do that.
Just to preserve flexibility for board members.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, will the secretary please call the roll?
On the motion by Director Garcia to approve the administration's recommendations with the additional modification to policy section 4 that clarifies that procurement staff are allowed to communicate with vendors. Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
And Chair Zambor.
Aye.
That's 4 ayes. The motion passes.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item 3, action on a request to revise administrative policies 6.34 and 8.48 on acceptable use relative to artificial intelligence. The recommendation is that the board approve the attached revisions to administrative policies 6.34 and 8.48 on acceptable use.
Would the administration please present the item?
Chair Zomber, members of the committee, Eduardo Galvan, Acting Superintendent. This evening, the Office of Academics will present recommended revisions to administrative policies 6.34 and 8.48. We ask your approval of the recommended revisions. With me today is, again, Chief Mims Howell, Mr. Meyer, and Ms. Neva Moga. Thank you.
All right, Chair Zambor and members of the committee, we have updated both the staff and student acceptable use policies in relation with the artificial intelligence guidance that we'd also like to provide to the district. And so we recommend that we, would like our students to be able to use and learn about generative AI. And so we needed policies to reflect this new technology.
Thank you. Do committee members wish to make comments or ask questions? Director Herndon.
Thank you very much. I was glad to see that the district is on top of this, being one that is involved in technology or was during my career. And the safety is extremely important. And I think it's a plus to our team here to be on top of that and monitoring that. So that is really excellent because AI is a little frightening these days, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Director Gokul Gandhi.
Yeah. Hi, thanks so much for bringing an AI policy forward. So I'm fine with the internet use policy. I am going to ask for you to take the AI policy back. So the Department of Education actually released in March this year a 71-page document of a guidance of AI usage in schools that's, it's artificial intelligence and the future of teaching and learning, and it's insights and recommendations. And it is like one of the best boring bureaucratic documents I've ever read in my life. And so I'm going to request that your team read that, and maybe with some cross-functional departments and central office, we create something a little bit more imaginative. I think what you've brought is a great start, but I think there's so much more room. And I think there's also room around like data privacy for our students and our staff as we incorporate more technology into our classrooms. Like, what do those apps look like? What usage does that have? Are we protecting our students and families? So Secretary Koala?
Is that a motion to hold the item in committee?
Yes. Or to send it back for review.
The motion to hold in committee would just keep it
Great.
here until the administration is ready to come back with
Yep.
additional work.
That is my motion.
Thank you. Mr. Chasen?
Sorry, just a point of clarity. The recommendation here does not include the board approving the document, which is the artificial intelligence guidance. It only is asking for approval of the updated acceptable use policies, which do include a brief statement on AI, but I do think offers improvements on cyberbullying and some other things that I do think would be permissible to move forward with the intent then of a more structured AI document coming back at a later date. And seeing as how the motion presently does not ask for the board to approve the narrative, which is the AI intelligence guidance document, I wonder if, I don't know that necessarily we need to make an altered motion, so I just want to offer that up.
Could you, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Director Gokul-Gandhi.
Could you provide some guidance around how we can move the approval forward with also requests to?
Madam Chair, Director Gokul-Gandhi, members, I guess it would depend on how this committee would like to proceed. If you want a more comprehensive policy on artificial intelligence within our curriculum program, you could move adoption of the recommended revisions to these two policies, which really concern acceptable use, and then further direct that the administration bring back a policy on artificial intelligence within our curriculum policies.
Director Gokul-Gandhi?
Yeah, that works for me.
So you are withdrawing your previous
I am,
motion?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Clarifying question for the members of the audience who might want to know when that's coming forward. Can we expect that in the August LRP meeting? Or do we need more time?
I would defer to the administration,
Administration?
how much time they would need.
Once we've reviewed that, could we provide you that date?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other further discussion, or do we have any members of the public who wish to make comments on this item?
We had no speaker request for this item, Madam Chair.
Further discussion? What is the pleasure of the committee with respect to this item?
You have a motion made by Director Gokul-Gandhi to approve the administration's recommendations with a further directive that the administration bring back a policy on artificial intelligence as it concerns curriculum.
Okay. Will the secretary please call the roll?
On that motion, Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul-Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
And Chair Zombor.
Aye.
That's 4 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item 4, action on a request to approve revisions to Administrative Policy 7.23, intramural programs. The recommendation is that the board approve the attached revisions to Administrative Policy 7.23.
Thank you. Will the administration please present the item?
Chair Zombor, members of the committee, Eduardo Galvan, Acting Superintendent, this evening, excuse me, I apologize. This evening, the Office of Academics will present recommended revisions to Administrative Policy 7.23. We ask your approval of the recommended revisions. With us tonight is Ms. Greb, who will be happy in conjunction with us answer questions you may have.
Do committee members wish to make, or Ms. Greb, would you like to say any words?
Good evening, Chair Zombor and members of the committee. Lynn Greb, Director of Recreation. For Policy 7.23, we just have some minor updates to better align with the current process in the district regarding youth sports programs. I believe the policy aligned, as it's written now, was in alignment with the way the program might have been structured a number of years ago when our middle schools, we had more middle schools and there were larger enrollments in those schools. So I think the changes we're proposing are better explanation of how the current structure is set up.
Thank you. Do committee members wish to make comments? Director Garcia.
I move to adopt the revisions to Administrative Policy 7.23 intramural programs as recommended by administration.
Madam Secretary, do any members of the public wish to make comments?
We had no speaker requests for this item, Madam Chair.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Will the Secretary please call the roll?
On the motion by Director Garcia to adopt the administration's recommendations, Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
And Chair Zombor.
Aye.
That's 4 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item 5, action on a request to approve revisions to Administrative Policy 7.24, Adult Enrichment Programs. The recommendation is that the board approve the attached revisions to Administrative Policy 7.24.
Would the administration please present the item?
Chair Zomber, members of the committee, Eduardo Galvan, Acting Superintendent. This evening, the Office of Academics will present recommended revisions to Administrative Policy 7.24. We ask for your approval of the recommended revisions. Again, Ms. Greb is here, as well as Ms. Mims Howell, to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Ms. Greb.
Good evening, Chair Zomber, members of the committee, Lynn Greb, Director of Recreation. This policy as well, we have some proposed minor updates really concerning the process of how the fees are set for our community recreation adult enrichment programs. And I believe we have a very sound process that is based around our cost recovery model to keep our programs affordable, which we are very proud of, and I know the board is as well. And these recommendations just get us up to date with how the process works today. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Gokul Gandhi.
I have one comment, and then I'm going to move approval. The weaving class that you provide at Gensland is so fabulous, and I just want you to know that I'm very bad at weaving, if you needed to know that, but in any other community, my friend took a weaving class in Washington, D.C., it was $200 for half the amount of classes, so the value that we're providing to the community is so amazing, and so I just want to reiterate and thank you for all the work that you do through this, and with that, I move approval of the item.
Thank you. Sushi 101 is good too. Director Herndon.
I move that we accept the recommendation of administration on Administrative Policy 7.24.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion?
Madam Chair, Director Gokul Gandhi had made a motion, essentially the same thing that Director Herndon stated. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we can go Director Herndon.
Okay. And we had no request to speak on this item.
Okay. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
On the motion by Director Gokul Gandhi to approve the administration's recommendation, Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Chair Zomber.
Aye.
That's 4 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item 6, action on a request to approve revisions to Administrative Policy 7.11, reading. The recommendation is that the board approve the attached revisions to Administrative Policy 7.11.
Would the administration please present the item?
Chair Zambor, members of the committee, Eduardo Galvan, Acting Superintendent. This evening, the Office of Academics will present recommended revisions to Administrative Policy 7.11. We ask your approval of the recommended revisions. Again, with me is Dr. Saffold and Chief Mims Howell to provide any clarity you may need.
Thank you. Ms. Saffold or Ms. Mims Howell, would either of you like to share any comments about the item?
Good evening, Chair Zambor and members of the committee. Felicia Saffold, Senior Director of Curriculum and Instruction. This reading policy was last updated in 2014, and so the major overhaul is really just making sure that we include all of the information and guidelines that are required with the Act 20. And many of that you heard with the other policy. And so in 7.11, what this policy is doing is just breaking down all of the requirements that we know we have with Act 20, which in regards to the reading assessments, the annual assessments, the screeners, and all of those things that really have not quite been defined yet by DPI. But we were just acknowledging that we will, in this policy, make sure that we are adhering to the guidelines with Act 20.
Thank you. Do committee members wish to make comments or ask questions? Director Herndon.
One of my questions is, I understand and know that initially we were a little ahead of Act 20 as it came to the science of reading. And I wanted to know if that's going to be district-wide when we finish rolling it out?
Administration.
Director Zambor, Director Hernan, Felicia Saffold, Senior Director of Curriculum and Instruction. Act 20 will be rolled out district-wide, and I do believe we are still very much ahead of Act 20. We've had committees meeting on this for over 2 years now, getting ready for it. And so as right now, we're laying out our plans for trainings for our administrators and for our teachers. And so we are still very much ahead of the game as where we need to be.
Thank you.
You answered part of my next question was how were we doing with professional development in this area? I know that we've been using quite a few tutoring groups, and they've had lots of success with the reading. And the children are amazing when you go watch them, and they're 5 years old, and they're reading and proud of it, and tell the tutors they don't need any assistance. They're really, really excelling at this. So I appreciate it, and thank you. With that, I'd like to make a motion on this once we're done.
Do any members of the public wish to make comments?
We had no speaker requests for this item, Madam Chair.
Okay. Mr. Chasen?
Thank you, Chair Zambor. Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. I'm going to call out some language here that hasn't been redlined, but it's one that I think, given some of the more recent events, probably deserves a further unpacking. And that is A, under third grade reading. All elementary schools shall be held accountable for all their children being able to read on grade level by the third grade. And I'm wondering if the administration can share with us, what should the public expect that accountability to look like?
Administration.
Chair Zambor, Matt Chasen, Felicia Saffold, Senior Director of Curriculum Instruction. One of the things that we have done already is by adopting our HMH curriculum, which is based in the science of reading. And so we have made sure that all of our schools, part of our professional development, our training, our rollout, our instructional guides are all around how to make sure that students are on grade level. And so starting with our curriculum, that's one of the things that we've been doing, training their teachers how to use that curriculum effectively so that it is standard aligned, so that it does show teachers exactly what to do in those small groups, which is really where that the science of reading is really, that's where it comes out where to teach those phonological skills in training. And so we've done a lot of work with preparing our teachers with that. And so a lot of the things that we'll be doing now is looking at our STAR assessments. We've been looking at that and how that aligns with the teachers. We've used some small pilot groups already in looking at those teachers that have been having this intensive training around guided reading and small group instruction, and how their classrooms score in terms of STAR assessment. And so STAR assessment is really our primary summative assessment that we're really looking at to look at the impact that we're making. And then we also do a lot of the formative assessments, just looking at how students are comprehending, and our HMH materials have a lot of built-in assessments that really help us to really check to see how students are doing as well. And so we were very intentional with adopting that particular curriculum because of all of the embedded assessments that they have in there for teachers to be able to check the process of their students.
Any follow-up? Mr. Chasen?
Yeah, I definitely appreciate the table setting to make sure that the system is one that provides for success, but I'm a little unclear on what precisely the statement, an elementary school shall be held accountable, means. And again, I think just in the space that we're in, I'm wondering if the administration could give us more precisely what that means after the monitoring component has completed.
Administration?
Eduardo Galvan, Acting Superintendent. Director Zambor, Mr. Chasen, members of the committee, part of that would be outlined in terms of the accountability is that the school has those systems in place. So when we've identified through that process of verifying whether that student is making progress or not, making sure that we follow our steps to provide that intervention, to notify families of that intervention, to make sure we are following up. So that would be the accountability, that we are doing those things as per what we've said we do and is good practice.
Thank you. Director Gokul Gandhi.
Yeah, so two things, we've talked a lot about at our SASE committee that with the I know I'm talking about another committee now, but with this rule, that we include Act 20 as a standing item and reading as a standing item. So, from the board's perspective, for the listening audience, accountability to me, one looks like having that conversation on a monthly basis, talking about reading, talking about implementation, talking about the schools that are adopting that and where they are at in that process. And two, as we look to an interim and a permanent superintendent, because of the importance of Act 20 across our state, I imagine that we'll have discussions of what that looks like in a superintendent performance plan and review. And so as I'm thinking about this and hearing you say in this moment, what does accountability look like, not only for the administration, but what does it look like for the board as well?
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Director Garcia.
I think for me, it opens up the question, to Mr. Chasen's point of, we are clearly calling out elementary schools in this specific part of it. So I'm wondering, do we need to include more people into what that accountability looks like from a policy standpoint? I think that would maybe help clear up some of the, I don't know, of, how accountability is, being rolled out. I know that it's very much pertained to the support systems that we're able to provide elementary schools to make sure that, they have that adequate targets and goals set in place. But I see where there's a little bit of kind of tension in terms of, from a policy perspective, where are we putting this accountability burden on? And I don't have an answer, but that's more of adding to the discussion, just making things a little bit more, nuanced and complicated, because why not?
Any further discussion? Administration?
Chair Zambor, Director Garcia, Mr. Chasen, members of the committee, Jennifer Moussau, Chief Academic Officer. One of the things that we have been talking about, and you brought up the monthly reporting, Director Gokul Gandhi, in September we had decided that we were going to return back to, when we do our academic assessment about the ambitious instruction, we were going to also add that in there. One of the things you talked about, the system of support, we also talked about making sure that there is systems of support within the schools. For instance, today was our first training for our elementary school teachers. Act 20 really is focused on the students and the professional development for the teachers of those students, K-5 through third grade. And so looking at our third graders, that's where the reading trajectory starts to pivot, what they can read. And so we can continue to talk about as a team what other checklists and things we can put in there. And when we report out in September, we can kind of give you some guidelines of what we're going to do. Like I said, today we started with our school leaders being trained, and we have a plan to talk about training our district staff who are supporting the teachers in the classrooms, as well as training our teachers when school starts back. So we can have all that information for you in our September report on SASE.
Thank you. Any further discussion? And Director Herndon, you have a motion on the floor to approve the administration's recommendation? Okay. Will the secretary please call the roll?
On the motion by Director Herndon to approve the administration's recommendation, Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
And Chair Zambor.
Aye.
That's 4 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item 7, action on a request to approve revisions to Administrative Policy 6.31, Professional Research Activities, Certificated Staff. The recommendation is that the board approve the attached revisions to Administrative Policy 6.31.
Would the administration please present the item?
Chair Zomber, members of the committee, Eduardo Galvan, Acting Superintendent. This evening, Dr. Melanie Stewart will present recommended revisions to Administrative Policy 6.31. We ask your approval of the recommended revisions. Dr.
Good
Stewart.
evening, Director Zombor, members of the committee, Melanie Stewart, Director of Research Assessment and Data. This policy, the two updates that have been made, the first one is aligned to how we talk more about our strategic plan, is that needs to be based in our mission and our vision, and also looking at our priorities and goals. We often have many people looking to do research, and we need to narrow and focus the research so that it is actually supporting our efforts and it is having as little impact in classrooms and with teachers, so that we are making certain it's aligned to what we are interested in as a district and growth, et cetera. The second component is because research has changed since we last had this policy. Originally, when this policy was brought back in the late 1990s, or it might have been brought back in 2016, is the primary research was done in schools. Now research is a little bit broader and includes more district topics. And so the line about having the researchers directly reach out to principals no longer makes sense. We also have systems of communication in place once a research project is approved by the research team, and the communication, again, to minimize the impact on our administrators, our school leaders, so that when a research project is approved, they're in the loop, and we don't have the researchers necessarily just reaching out trying to get support at that time.
Thank you. Do committee members wish to make comments or ask questions? Director Garcia.
You know, a lot of the conversations in terms of current research in general, specifically that involve, you know, youth or, you know, folks of marginalized identities and communities, really revolves around the idea of data sovereignty. I don't know if we have anything that pertains to policies that we currently have in place into that, but, you know, I think I would just be interested in knowing, like, first of all, like, where are we, you know, with that, ensuring that, you know, I think it's great that, you know, that we contribute to a body of, like, advancing knowledge, because I think that there's a lot of lessons that can be learned from our district. I just want to make sure that we are very much taking ownership as to, you know, when, like, how data is collected, like what the findings are, that we're in control of that narrative, so that it's not just, you know, a lab open for public, but it's really, and I think that we're trying to get to this in terms of making sure that it's aligned to our mission and vision, but I just wanted to specifically call out on the topic of data sovereignty.
Administration.
Director Zombor, Director Garcia, those details are actually in Administrative Policy 2.15 that is referenced here. We have many procedures that are in place. These are also on our website. So you can go to the website and search research and then look for the site about getting permission to do either a survey and or a research project. And that outlines a lot of the functional steps that are in place before we even consider a policy or consider a project, that a researcher has to go through those things. In terms of the data sovereignty as well, we have safeguards in place that when a project is completed, there is a requirement to destroy all data so that the data is retained by the district and not out there. We are asking now for confirmation of destruction so that we know that the data is not being used for other projects that haven't been garnered. If there is a publication from this, we also require that the publication be provided to us 30 days in advance so that we can review and make comments and require If there is inaccuracies in the data and the results, the use of the results, that we have that opportunity for correction.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions.
Is there any further discussion? Madam Secretary, do any members of the public wish to make comments?
Madam Chair, we have no request to speak on this item.
Okay. What is the pleasure of the committee with respect to this item? Director Herndon.
I move that we accept the recommendation of Administrative Policy 6.31.
Will the Secretary please call the roll?
On the motion by Director Herndon to approve the administration's recommendation, Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
And Chair Zombor.
Aye.
That's 4 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item 8, action on a request to approve revisions to Administrative Policy and Procedure 6.17, personal property loss, staff. The recommendation is that the board approve the attached revisions to Administrative Policy and Procedure 6.17.
Would the administration please present the item?
Chair Zombor and members of the committee, Eduardo Galvan, Acting Superintendent. This evening, the Office of Human Resources will present recommended revisions to the Administrative Policy and Procedure 6.17. We ask for your approval of the recommended revisions. Again, Ms. Johnson-Bent is here to clarify any questions you may have.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson-Bent.
Good evening, Chair Zombor, members of the committee. My name is Rochelle Johnson-Bent. I'm the Manager of Procurement and Risk Management. I'm here to ask for the red lines to be approved as it relates to first policy 6.17. This was requested because it allows to clear up the language that we as the administration will cover limited compensation for loss or damaged property to our staff. And then we wanted to make sure it's clear to give them guidance that the procedure of Administrative Procedure 6.17 gives further information as to how they can make those claims when they have lost or damaged property. So the first, again, we are asking for the language as proposed. Board employees may receive limited compensation for loss or damage incurred to personal belongings utilized during work duties. And that's important because a lot of times staff would like to bring something that they lost that is not necessarily a work equipment or items that they are using for work duties. So we wanted to clarify that language, and then again to make sure that they have reference to where to follow that procedure. As it relates to Administrative Procedure 6.17, the first paragraph was modified to clarify and state what 6.17 policy stated, and to remove the language that that we no longer have contracted employees, and therefore the grievance process is also not an awarded process. And then in the next section, we wanted to provide some details as to what kind of equipment and materials that MPS generally do provide to staff, so that they have an idea of what equipment would be covered, and if they do needed items that are not in this list, that they had to go to the building administrator and ask for those items if they are necessary, again, for their work duties. As we continue down the red lines, we also ask that be clarified that jewelry and or cash not be reimbursed under any circumstance. Particularly cash is one we get a lot when someone's wallet is stolen, and there's no way to verify the amounts of cash that people keep on them. As it relates to the next sections, we wanted to clarify and remind employees that they have a duty to secure their items, and if there is an item that they have on their persons or in their classroom or in their office that is a high value item, they should notify the administrator, and then not keep those items in our building unsecured without anyone knowing. And then it kind of outlines the reasons why. We have people coming and going out of our buildings for projects. We have people coming and going out of our buildings for programming, as well as contractors. And so we just want to remind people that, or staff, that when they leave their personal items, they are subject to potential theft. The next section that we wanted to, the next section that we wanted to add to the policy was that damage to vehicles are not covered loss for MPS staff. and that comes up a lot. That's one of the most common requests we get as it relates to personal property loss, is when somebody's vehicle is vandalized, damaged, or windows are broken, that is not a covered loss. I know in the past, and I'm not quite sure of the exact year that it was no longer offered service to staff, but we have continuously reminded staff that is no longer a covered loss. Next was the section talking, as we asked for the contractual reimbursement limit. Right now, the limit is currently at $150. We're asking the committee to recommend an increase up to $400. This was based off of the calculation of this was requested because of inflation of price. The last time this policy was, God bless you, the last time this policy was reviewed was in 1991. And so at that time, and to current day, the inflation of that value has increased up significantly, almost to about $450. In addition to that, we looked at what property loss we have typically approved and what damages are people trying to get coverage for. And the most common one that we do pay for is glasses for people, prescription glasses. And those are usually pretty costly, and those can range up to somewhere as low as $200 or $150. But a lot of times those glasses do go into the $400 or $500 range. And because that is usually lost because of a student grabbing it from a teacher's desk and stepping on them, or stealing their glasses, or breaking their glasses through not workers' comp injuries, then that's how we ask them for those damages to be paid. And the last is we wanted to clarify the process of how staff should request their personal damage property to be reimbursed. And so we just cleaned up the language to specify that they should go through the web portal, MConnect, to request that their personal items be reimbursed, that they must include the receipts for the items that they're reimbursing. So for instance, they get a new glass prescription, we do need the original receipt to be attached to that item, and that would be considered if they, for instance, don't have their original receipt, that they can go to the vendor and ask for a duplicate, and we could consider that as well.
Thank you. Do members of the committee wish to make comments or ask questions? I do have one if I could pass the gavel.
Yep, go ahead, Director Zomber.
Thank you. I really appreciate you bringing this forward. It looks like we definitely needed to update it. I do have a couple questions. Under number 7, it says the contractual reimbursement. Since we don't have a contract anymore, should we strike contractual? Or is this referring to something else?
Administration.
Chair Zomber, members of the committee, that is a correct assessment. We can correct that and have that corrected before the board.
Perfect.
Director Zomber.
Thank you. And then my next question is, I know some teachers have a home insurance policy that's very popular with teachers that offers increased coverage for personal property loss on the school premises. I guess my question is, if a teacher also has that policy, when employees submit for reimbursement for this loss, are we just double checking that they're not also using their own insurance policy for loss in the classroom?
Administration.
Chair Zomber, members of the committee, no, at this time, that is not part of the questioning. When we have a form that outlines the reasons on how they lost their items, we verify with the staff. We do conduct an investigation with if there was any witness or staff to confirm that the loss actually did occur. But at this time, no, we do not ask if there was another claim made against their insurance.
Director Zomber.
Is that something that you would recommend we do, or maybe can we look into it just to see, or if that's not a best practice?
Administration.
Chair Zomber and members of the committee, it's something we can look into. I would have to follow up with the process of that, because sometimes, for instance, even with our workers' comp claims, getting information as to what was filed and how it was filed and what was excluded and included can be just difficult to get that information, but it's definitely possible to add that to the process.
Director Zomber.
Thank you. And I assume the insurance company probably is also making sure that they didn't already make a claim through the district, but I just wanted to raise that as something that I know a lot of MPS teachers have that coverage. That's it. I'll take the gavel back.
Okay, passing the gavel back.
Thank you. Do any committee members, any further discussion? Director Garcia.
Yes, my question is relative to, there had been a wave of break-ins into buildings at nighttime when no one was around, and depending on like if they got into classrooms, most of the, I guess like lost or damaged items were school-related. So I just want clarification in terms of if there was any damage to personal items. This is when this policy would apply. And then that would be the responsibility of the teacher or the staff at that school to go through this claims process?
Administration.
Chair Zomber, Director Garcia, members of the committee, that is correct. So what happens if a break-in happens into a school and a teacher says, I have my laptop, like my Mac laptop and my locked away in my cabinet, my administrator knew about it. So this is part of the investigation. So they would go through the process of filling out the property loss form. It provides provide as much information as they can completely. We then we then conduct an investigation where we start to verify how was the item stored, was the item allowed on the premise. That's also why we wanted clarification in this policy to verify that the building administrators know about these items being stored, so that we don't have teachers just keeping a lot of high-cost personal items stored in our buildings. And so that was part of why we asked for that recommendation. And then once we find out that was secured properly, it was an approved item, then it could be reimbursed up to the max of what the board approves.
Thank you. Any follow-up?
Nope, thank you.
Thank you. What is the pleasure of the committee with respect to this item? Director Gokul Gandhi.
I move approval of the item.
Will the secretary please call the roll?
Can I clarify that the intent is to approve the recommendations inclusive of striking the word contractual from line 7?
That is correct, yes.
Thank you. Madam Chair, for the record, there were no requests to speak on this item.
Thank you.
And you ready for the
Yes,
roll?
will the secretary please call the roll?
On the motion by Director Gokul Gandhi to approve the administration's recommendation inclusive of striking the word contractual from section 7. Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
And Chair Zomber.
Aye.
That's 4 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item 9, action on a request to reaffirm Administrative Policy 6.32, pepper spray use of. The recommendation is that the board reaffirm Administrative Policy 6.32.
Would the administration please present the item?
Chair Zomber and members of the committee, Eduardo Galvan, Acting Superintendent. This evening, we request your approval to reaffirm Administrative Policies 6.32 on the use of pepper spray. I have Carol Eady with me here tonight to give any more information that you may need.
Thank you. Ms. Eady?
Chair Zomber, members of the committee, Carol Eady, Senior Director of Benefits, Pension, and Compensation. As Acting Superintendent stated, we are here asking your approval to reaffirm the Administrative Policy 6.32 on the use of pepper spray.
Do committee members wish to make comments or ask questions? Madam Chair, are there any members of the public who wish to make comments?
We had no speaker requests for this item.
Okay. Director Garcia.
I'd like to move approval of the admin policy 6.32 pepper spray use of as recommended by administration.
Will the secretary please call the roll?
On the motion by Director Garcia to approve the administration's recommendation, Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
And Chair Zomber.
Aye.
That's 4 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Madam Chair, that was the last item on this meeting's agenda.
There being no further business before the committee, this meeting is adjourned.